Bitcoin is not something you own. It's not even something you possess. It's a secret you keep.
If you can't get money to get out of a country that's going into a war, let's say that you were in Ukraine, all of a sudden you can't get your money out of the bank. If you knew the passcode for your Bitcoin, you could still access capital and get out of it. Bitcoin is the first time in human history where we have a completely non-controllable, decentralized ecosystem. I think that Bitcoin means different things to a lot of different people. In the West, a lot of people are purely looking at this as a speculative asset. What is the best piece of advice that you have received?
That which you can do.
I'm pumped for this conversation, man. Your books are a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions on how the podcast or anything goes? It's pretty straightforward, but it's all pre-recorded. I wanted to actually, because I was speaking with you, take a slightly different approach than I've been taking some other interviews, where we'll start with just like some fun questions, and then I really want to dive into topics that are related to some of your different books. So I've got questions for like each book, like the 3-minute read. I go in order, then Bitcoin, Everything Divided by 21 Million, and then Bitcoin Independence Reimagined. And then kind of, I'm thinking we leave it at almost like a cliffhanger saying, hey, you've got a new book that everyone should go check out. And then we don't go through the details of that one.
Of Everything Divided. Yeah. That one is soon a year old. So I'm, but the latest release I've done is like the rehash of Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined, which is now put together as one book with a new foreword by Prince Philip of Serbia, and that's like the latest release. But sure, Everything Divided by 21 Million is still relatively new, and I'm planning to use that merch for a long time, I guess, since the equation is sort of my claim to fame.
Yeah,
so
it's incredible.
It's a pretty weird chain of events there. So sure. I mean, I don't know about 3-minute reads. That was more of a trial run than an actual proper book.
Okay.
So, but if you want to ask about that, sure. I might not remember that much from that era, though, because like there so much has happened since. But that's sort of, that book is just a collection of my Medium articles from that era. So that's where I started writing about Bitcoin.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And also, if you think it would be better, I could also just not even go, like I could not even mention the titles, and I could just kind of ask the question. So for example, like one of the first questions that I have teed up here for that section of like the book, the 3-minute reads is, you mentioned that Bitcoin is not just a digital currency, but a technological innovation that has the potential to change the world. It is a decentralized and trustless system that allows for secure and transparent transactions without the need for intermediaries.
Yeah.
And then the question would be, could you unpack why a decentralized and trustless system without intermediaries has the potential to change the world? So
all right.
It's those types of questions where it was just like concepts from the book. And then I take a concept and then ask a question around it.
Sure. Just wing it, because like what I'm trying to become good at this point is improvising and being being thrown into situations where I just have to ramble on about something. Like that's what I want to be good at. So everything is practice for me. So I don't pre-plan my talks or anything, or have very few planned things in them. So I'm trying to get good at jazz, if you know what I mean. So
awesome. You're going to get a lot of jazz practice today because we got quite a few. So the first question I got here, it's a fun one, is if you could swap lives with anyone in the world for one day, who would it be and why?
The first people that come to mind are my family, like my kids and my wife. I mean, I'd have to pick a day carefully. Maybe, but it sounds a bit weird to want to swap lives with your wife, but maybe I wouldn't switch the night, but during daytime, just in order to understand her perspective a bit better, I guess, or my kids, like, understand their perspective, because I think when I swap back, that would be very valuable to me. Uh, Swapping with anyone else would probably just be confusing.
That's a good answer. So, second question: if your computer could talk, what do you think it would say to you?
I think it would bully me for not memorizing more short commands. Like, don't you know you can do that by pressing this button? And I'm like, okay. So I've been doing it wrong for 30 years.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many things that my computer can do that I've just not taken the time to actually learn. And I got
Yeah.
to take a day or two to just learn every single command, and it'll probably pay off in the long run.
Yeah. I know more than most, I guess, but there's always a shortcut to be learned in computing. And yeah, I what I hope what would be a fun comment from my computer to me is that if my computer confessed that it identified as non-binary.
Final question before we dive into. I'm really, really excited for this interview. By the way, there's for everyone listening. I think that this interview that we have is going to be one of the most informative. I'm excited for everything that I'm going to be learning here. You've written a number of different books, so I've got some great questions teed up for you that I think everyone's going to love who's listening in. The final fun question here is: if you could bring back any piece of outdated technology, what would it be?
Bring back any piece of outdated technology. That's also a very hard question. This could be outdated by like a decade or two, or it could be outdated with like by a couple of thousand of years, I guess.
That's a
Uh,
good point. I didn't give
so
addition. I was almost thinking it could be any time frame. Like one
yeah.
example would be like, oh, you could bring back a Game Boy Color, for example.
All right. I would probably not bring back the Game Boy or a mini disc player. In that case, I'd bring back the Commodore 64, which was my first computer, and that I've realized in hindsight taught me so much about how computers work from the ground up. And that base level of knowledge of how these things are constructed has helped me immensely in just understanding computers in general. So I'd say the Commodore 64 just because I love that machine so much.
It's a good answer. And it's a perfect segue into the next part of this conversation, which is going into some of the books that you've written. So you came out with a book called The 3 Minute Reads on Bitcoin, A Year of Thoughts. And before even diving into some of the questions I have around what you wrote about in the book, I'm wondering what inspired you initially to put this together.
The thing was, like, 3 Minute Reads on Bitcoin is just a collection of the articles I had written up to that point. So I started writing articles about Bitcoin in 2017, Medium articles, and got published by an online magazine called Hacker Noon for a long time there. And I decided at some point to just see what the process was like making a book and publish DIY publishing it. On self-publishing a book basically and putting it together. So I did, and that's when I realized that now the only book with my name on it that's available on the internet is a book I'm not really proud of, because it's just a collection of articles and it's not even proofread or edited or anything. So it wasn't a very good book. So that's why I decided to write Sovereignty Through Mathematics and make a proper book about Bitcoin. And yeah, I told the story a million times, but I started writing that on New Year's Eve 2019, and promised myself to write a page a day for the entire year. That was my New Year's resolution. And like all other New Year's resolutions, you break them at a certain point, and I broke mine after 106 days because really felt the book was done at that point. So that's when I released it, and yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, I feel like everyone goes through this type of journey within learning about Bitcoin and learning about this technology. I myself went through it where your views change so many times and this industry moves so quickly that even if you look at something that you've written 4 years ago, I feel like in many other fields that would be okay. You might believe a lot of the same things, but 4 years later in this industry, so much happens in such a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I try to change my mind about it because I find like I don't think anyone on earth actually understands Bitcoin, because I think it's so multifaceted and so layered. And like, for instance, you used both the words technology and industry there, which are two words that I very rarely use when talking about Bitcoin today. I see it more as like an agreement on a fixed set of rules. That's the shortest explanation, or the shortest answer to the question, what is Bitcoin, that I can come up with. And like mining and all the computing parts of Bitcoin are really just I mean, a computer is nothing but a fancy abacus. It's a tool that has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to do mathematics for us. That's what a computer does. Mathematics. It's better than, or not even mathematics. I'll call it calculation. It can calculate way faster than we can, than we can within our brains. So it's just an extension of our minds, which means that Bitcoin is an agreement on a fixed set of rules. And the rules are you need to prove that you've done the work in order to play this game of Bitcoin. And if you want to own a Bitcoin, you can't, because you can't really own something that doesn't exist, and you can't even be in possession of a Bitcoin. What you can do is you can memorize a secret, a private key, either as a number or as a seed phrase or any other iteration of how you can remember a private key, or the location of a private key. It doesn't really matter. When you memorize your key, you are your Bitcoins. You and your Bitcoins are part of the same. You're the same entity. The information that unlocks the Bitcoin is always in your head, ultimately. So it's not like anything else you can own, because everything else you can own is like more or less a tangible thing, like this Coke Zero can here that I'm drinking that I shouldn't really be drinking. It's something I can own, and I can touch it, and it's there. And I can even own something more abstract, like a company, which is like what I own then is a bunch of papers telling me that I'm the CEO of this company, and it has a couple of employees or whatever. So what I'm owning is a contract. But in Bitcoin, all I do is keep a secret, and keeping that secret can be very valuable, and it can unlock paths in life for me that I couldn't unlock without keeping that secret. So, and that's all it is, and that in itself is enough to change the world.
So how did you get involved in all of this? Like, when did you first hear about Bitcoin? What initially drew you to wanting to learn about it, write about it, and eventually publish books?
I don't remember the exact point, but I guess I was sort of primed for Bitcoin because I had always had like libertarian leaning views about reality. I could never really understand why humanity as a whole was so happily obedient all the time, because someone told them that this is how things work. I never really bought the concept of a nation or a religion or anything like that. Like, I always viewed those as somewhat fictional, except for the violence part. And I traveled around a lot, so I saw a lot of different countries and a lot of different political systems. And it never made sense to me that different rules should apply to different people based solely on where they happen to be born. I always thought that was pretty strange. But it wasn't
until It is pretty strange when you say it that way, when you bring that up. It's just
something
that's
right?
completely accepted
it's just
by
something no one
the
ever
entire world.
yeah, it's something no one ever thinks about, but it's the most basic thing in the world. Like, why do different rules apply to different people? It's just strange. Seeing a lot of countries, the more countries you visit and the more you see of the world, the more bullshitty the the differences between different places become, and borders become very bullshitty. And especially now when we have Zoom calls like this, and social media, where you can, by the click of a button, you can connect to absolutely anyone else in the world. My network now, after being in Bitcoin for a while and doing social media, and I'm like 2 steps from any other human being in the world, by just being connected to the people I'm connected to now. So and that's insanely powerful. And I think the more time that goes by, the more connected people become, and the shorter the steps between people. So I think it will be hard for governments to keep the floodgates closed, so to speak, when the people have video calls, social media, and Bitcoin, and that trio of immensely powerful technologies is just unstoppable. How could anyone ever go to war again, knowing that you're just 2 or 3 steps away from anyone else in the world? It's just we're insanely connected at this point. And the value of a communications network is its number of users squared, as Metcalfe's law tells us. And when you apply that to this combo, it's just I have a very optimistic view of the future, which is pretty uncommon in Bitcoin circles, because most people see the bad side. They see this constant stomping boot to the face, CBDC, Orwellian bullshit future. And we had a bit of taste of that during the pandemic, who shall not be named, crisis here the other year. But like, people snapped out of that really, really fast, and politicians had to follow suit and stop the bullshit, because it's harder today to harass people than it used to be. Just rewind the tape back to the 80s, and the whole East Bloc in Europe, the Soviet Union and all its adjacent countries, were basically just a big prison, and they tortured everyone in it, and everyone was starving, and it was just horribly, horribly awful. And no one knew anything else. They thought that was just the way things were. But we snapped out of that, and I think humanity is able to snap out of a lot of things. And Bitcoin is perhaps the most powerful of those tools that we have for liberating ourselves and leveling the playing field, and make the world great again, I guess. So but the question was when I discovered Bitcoin, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I always do this. I
no, it's incredible.
Ramble on a tangent, and that's well. So the thing was, I was sort of primed for Bitcoin already, and at the time I was working on a tall ship sailing back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean with high school students on board. And I realized the flaws of the school system, the Swedish school system, a lot, because I saw it from the inside, and also like how the different countries malfunctioned in different ways. And like many other Bitcoiners from my era, I discovered it mostly through Andreas Antonopoulos and all the talks he had back in the day, and decided to take an online course in 2016. So I did that. I was on another job then, driving small crew transfer vessels to wind farms in the Baltic Sea and the North Sea. And at the time, they hadn't even started to build the site, and the weather was too bad. So we were just basically sitting in a cabin waiting for 2 weeks to go home again, just being on standby. And during that time, I decided to take this online course. So I did that, and made it through that with flying colors, and started thinking about how to use my newfound knowledge about this weird abstract thing. Thought about doing the whole master's degree in digital currencies, but decided to just acquire a bit of Bitcoin, not very much, but buy some and then start to write about it because I found it so fascinating. And I did, and one of the articles became sort of semi-viral about how to get a hold of your own private keys before the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. And after that sort of went sort of viral, I realized that I might have a voice here, and it might not be too late to. I might not be too late to the party, so I kept on writing about it, and yeah, that's the story basically.
So when you look at the environment today, with it feels like there's a huge attack going on the industry. You're seeing all these bank failures. You're seeing people getting really upset about crypto, to use a blanket term. Bitcoin gets
What
looped in with crypto a lot.
Yeah, that's why I don't like the term the industry, because there's no Bitcoin industry. There's a crypto industry, and it's a bunch of snake oil salesmen trying to lure gullible people into their schemes, and that's an industry, I guess. But Bitcoin itself is not an industry; it's an agreement. Like I run my node and I choose what software to run on it. I decide. There's no there's no CEO anywhere of a big company that can tell me what Bitcoin is and isn't. So I don't view it as an industry at all. Of course, there are big mining firms and there are exchanges, but like exchanges are a transitory thing. They won't exist in the future because there will be no need for them. Like they're only there if you want to trade some other shitcoin, a kleptocurrency or a cryptocurrency for the real deal, which is Bitcoin. That's their only purpose. And when we're hyper Bitcoinized, there will be no use case for anyone to buy or sell shitcoins. And miners, the way I see it, miners don't create Bitcoin. The users create the Bitcoins, and miners are employed by node owners to create Bitcoin for them, and they get the reward because we pay them. We let them get the reward by acknowledging the new block, and thereby rewarding the miner. So they're employed. They cannot change the rules or even influence them very much, because the people who run the Bitcoin software decide what the rules are, and if should they decide to do something malicious, we will not employ them anymore. So the node runners are employing the miners, but even if I use custodial wallets and use Bitcoin via third parties, I'm still routing them through a node, so I can at least theoretically pressure that node to do what I tell them to in order to include my transactions into whatever whatever they want to relay to the miners. And even more than that, I would say that yeah. So even Bitcoin users interact with everyone else in the economy. So by proxy, even no coiners create Bitcoin by exchanging goods and services with Bitcoin users. So every human being is involved in Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. They can be very meta and very far away if you hardly even have heard about it. But you are connected to. There's no such thing as a circular economy. It's all connected. So yeah, that's how I view it, and that's why I think the word industry is so. It's been so diluted by what is actually an industry, which is the casino industry of the shitcoin companies. That's the industry. I mean, I guess you're in mining, and you might see it another way. But the way I see it, the miners are employed by the users of the network.
Fair enough. Yeah, I do think that ecosystem would probably be a better word for it. Would that be fair enough to say?
Ecosystem is fine. Yeah, I can agree to that, because it's an ecosystem that is everyone in the ecosystem is sort of interdependent on each other. We need the users, we need the miners, we need all of it to function.
So you mentioned this term hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah.
Let's start by having you define hyper Bitcoinization, and then I'm really curious to hear your views on how we move towards a world with hyper Bitcoinization.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, I think hyper Bitcoinization is personal. Like everything else in Bitcoin, it starts and ends with the individual. So you can be a hyper Bitcoinized individual today. I'm not, by the way. I use euros and I use dollars and I use a lot of other uh, legacy shitcoins. Um, but you can live off of Bitcoin only, even today, if you're in a place like Costa Rica or El Salvador, I guess. It's still pretty hard to hyper Bitcoinize yourself and to do all of your best business in Bitcoin, but I know people who do and who have been doing that for quite some time. Uh, then again, if you talk about hyper Bitcoinization as a bigger concept that will play out over the next couple of decades or centuries, it's when people realize over time that this type of money is superior to all other types of money that preceded it. Because everyone who gets into Bitcoin does that after a while. We realize how much better it is, and there's people will continue to realize that over time. So more and more users and a bigger network effect, and the more users there are, the more powerful the network becomes. And especially with Lightning and everything that's being built on top of Bitcoin, it's just insanely powerful and so much better than everything else. But there's more, and then you get these doomsday prophets saying, first of all, they say that the network cannot handle more than 7 transactions per second, which is true for base layer, but not for Lightning Network. But they also say that if we are to hyper Bitcoinize within 10 years, we won't be able to fire up enough Lightning nodes in time, because only 7 nodes, Lightning nodes, can be fired up per second, theoretically. But that to me is also missing a couple of points. Like, first is the number go up technology, because I think everyone underestimates, except Balaji, underestimates how quick this, how weird the price increase can be, and how fast we can go to $1 million per Bitcoin and so on and so forth. Which means that each Satoshi on those in those Lightning channels will be worth way more, and that's a scaling solution in itself. But the real kicker, I think, is that people on a Bitcoin standard are more reluctant to do monetary transactions at all, because we get out of our consumerist mindset. Bitcoin makes us adopt a lower time preference, and when you have inflationary money, you want to spend it as fast as possible, because it depreciates in value over time. And with Bitcoin, the opposite is true. You know that if you don't spend it, it will be worth more tomorrow. So you're not very inclined to spend it. If you spend it, you spend it on stuff that you think will help the ecosystem. Bitcoiners are very eager to do that. And what is that? That is helping other Bitcoiners. And we are all inclined to help one another. Like what we're doing now within this pod is like, I'm a Bitcoiner, you're a Bitcoiner. We're helping one another by having this conversation. And we're not exchanging sats. We're not using the network except in a meta sense. So we're talking about Bitcoin, and therefore this is also using Bitcoin, albeit in a very abstract way. So I think the necessity for monetary transactions per second will go down and not up over time. That's very counterintuitive, but if you view Bitcoin as the inverse of what we're living in now, so 1 divided by clown world, that's Bitcoin. 1 divided by clown world equals everything divided by 21 million.
Beautifully put. Yeah, it's one of the most eye-opening things for people when they really start to understand how the monetary system works and how Bitcoin functions, that you want to take a longer time horizon to your decision making. You don't want to just spend right away, because you know that that value in that Bitcoin is going to be worth so much more in the future.
Yeah, there's a great quote from my grandfather. He said, "That which you can do without, you own." And it's a phrase I've been thinking about all my life. I never met my grandfather, but these words are just stuck in my head, because I think it's so profound. And I think Bitcoin is a shortcut to that insight. That you can do without, you own. So like me, for instance, I like good food, and I like to play guitar. I like to have a computer to talk to people through, and I like to brush my teeth every once in a while. But and go to places, I guess, go to another country every now and then. But apart from that, I have very few material cravings. I mean, uh, my wife always nags at me for my socks and my underwear being in need of changing. I should update my wardrobe, but I only have black t-shirts and black socks. Like I don't have very many material cravings. And I think this is due to being closer to that insight that happiness, like consumerism, is not a road to happiness. You may think that, and of course it's different for different people. Everyone's different, but I think Bitcoin is a force in the right direction. It will help us out of this consumerist crap trap that we're in. We think we think we need to buy a lot of shit we don't need, and why not just get out of that? Like the current system is set up in a way so that we need to buy a ton of crap in order for it to function at all, and that's just very destructive. Every other problem on Earth stems from that. Like we can never solve climate change or any environmental problem that we may or may not have without solving consumerism first or solving money first. Like everything, Bitcoin fixes this. It fixes everything. That's the point.
It can be even worse when you think about it, not just consumerism, but the fact that it adds so many more additional stressors. Like even if you have the resources to be able to buy a lot of things, then you have to worry about all those things that you own.
They end up owning
additional stress.
They end up owning you, and that's the old saying, right? But that is just the flip side of that which you can do without you own coin. It's the same phenomena. So the further away you can get from that, the better off you are, I think.
So I think that Bitcoin means different things to a lot of different people. And in the West, a lot of people are purely looking at this as a speculative asset. And they're not like the Bitcoiners who've really dove down past just looking at the market value. What do you think, or let's say that you're speaking to someone who is in that camp where they're saying, look, I don't think Bitcoin has value, and they are just at the very tippy top of the rabbit hole. They've maybe read a few articles. What are the first things that you try and introduce them to in terms of concepts or places where you point them to really get them to start to understand what we're looking at here within the Bitcoin ecosystem?
That's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is that GIF from the Dark Knight movie where Morgan Freeman says "good luck." you know that one sarcastically, like "good luck with that." But I don't know. First of all, everything is speculation. Like whenever we act, we speculate that something will happen in the future. We anticipate the future. So there's no clear line between what constitutes speculation and not. I think the problem is mostly that people think they buy bitcoins to acquire more dollars, but you should really accumulate bitcoin to have fewer dollars. That's a way better goal long term. But it doesn't really matter what these people think and how what they're doing right now. It's all transitory. It's all headed in the vectors all pointing in the same direction. As to what I point them to in terms of Bitcoin education is, of course, my own stuff and the little videos I made with Yoni Appelberg. I think we made a bunch of videos that are hopefully eye openers to people. So. Other than that, I recommend MicroStrategy's webpage, hope.com. I think that's a good starting point as well. There's one's called bitcoinonly.com. There's one called bitcoinresources.com. Those are very good. My friend Gigi's page is very good. He's got some good recommendations there of how to get into Bitcoin and what books to read and what videos to watch. So there's a lot of resources like that. there's a lot of noise distorting the signal, but the signal is there if you know how to find it. Jeff Booth wrote a great article about how to find signal in the noise, so I recommend that too. Yeah, that's my recommendations, I guess.
And when you're speaking with people about this concept of, I think you mentioned it here in this conversation, but Bitcoin doesn't have a CEO. It's a system that anyone can opt into, and it doesn't care if you want to control it, because at the end of the day, it's decentralized and no one can stop it. And this is one of the powerful things about Bitcoin, is that unlike any other system where, for example, the dollar or any other system that can be centrally manipulated and controlled, Bitcoin is the first time in human history where we have a completely non-controllable, decentralized ecosystem and set of rules that are followed despite a powerful entity or organization trying to take it down. And
exactly.
So with all that said, how do you look at how things play out with the Bitcoin ecosystem continuing to grow and evolve and gain traction, as well as being entrenched in a world where there's so many strong vested interests that do not want Bitcoin to succeed? Because at the end of the day, if you have a more open and fair society in a world with Bitcoin, there are a lot of strong vested interests that lose power because of that. And so inherently, even though Bitcoin shouldn't be political, politics in a way interfere with its growth. And so how do you see things playing out over the next handful of years as we reach a world where Bitcoin becomes more widely adopted around the world?
Yeah, we shouldn't forget what happened to gold and how all the gold was confiscated in one way or another in just about every country. But that is
even in the US.
Yeah, the 6102 thing. But gold is very confiscatable, and Bitcoin is, as we know, unconfiscatable because it's keeping a secret. And right now, like if I put a gun to your head and say, "Give me all your Bitcoins," you can give me a tiny percentage of your Bitcoins, and I can never know if what I got was all of it or just a minuscule percentage of what you actually own. And that's already true for pointing a gun at any head in the entire world. I cannot know how much Bitcoin another human being owns. There's no way for me to know, to have that information. So over time, what that means over time is that the dynamics of violence change. The profitability from being the aggressor and trying to take something from someone, regardless if you're a highway robberman or a taxman or a central banker, that kind of thievery and bad behavior is not as profitable on a Bitcoin standard as it was on a fiat standard. And by this just being an agreement on a fixed set of rules, like, how do you stop that? How do you stop an idea that is so powerful and that functions without anyone's permission? Like, there's no one on earth can change Bitcoin and no one on earth can control it. But everyone who knows a secret, a private key, has absolute 100% control of their part of the 21 million Bitcoins that would ever exist. So yeah, I think it's way more profound than anyone else thinks, because we're than anyone else. I'm saying this wrong, but I think it's more profound than most people most people are clueless of how profound this change is, because we are Bitcoin, all of us. Like we're if you compare it to a language, like say someone wanted to destroy English and wipe English out of the face of the earth, how do you do that? Or wanted to ban emails or phones, or but email and phones is actually easier to destroy than Bitcoin, I believe.
Yeah,
because
I believe
Bitcoin is
Robert
a language.
Breedlove gives the example of, it's like trying to outlaw gravity. It's like you can make gravity illegal, but if I drop something right now, gravity will show you that it doesn't care about the law that you just passed.
Yeah, I heard him say that, but gravity is still something in objective reality. The Bitcoin is still an intersubjective. It's a rule set that humans came up with. We came up with this agreement, and we agree. As long as we agree that it's a good idea, it will be a good idea. So it's more akin to a language. So how do you stop a language from existing? You try to wipe out everyone who speaks the language. How do you even know who speaks Bitcoin or not? You don't. You cannot know if a person speaks Bitcoin or not. Like you can wipe out us public dorks that made the mistake of being public about it because we're too excited. That's possible, I guess. But the thing itself, impossible. It's an idea, and it's a better idea than the other ideas that preceded it. And like, bad ideas don't survive, good ideas survive. Like, there's a chapter in the new book about this, by the way, about how, and we made a little video animation about why Bitcoin is the greatest meme of all time, because it survives and propagates, not only because it spreads very nicely through internet memes via its users or its hosts. It also gives those hosts superpowers in the real world. I mean, if you're a Bitcoiner, you can bypass a lot of bullshit, and you can function better than normies can, and you can do more things. And as Bitcoin purchasing power goes up, you get more political power, more lobbying power, and Bitcoins are everywhere. They're in every parliament on the planet. They're in every organization. They're like, sure, Bitcoiners might not be very outspoken at this point in time, but we're extremely early, and we're witnessing the birth of something truly, truly special. So I choose to be optimistic, and I choose to act as if Bitcoin exists, because if I do, I increase its chances of actually existing.
So going back to what you talked about earlier in this conversation, is you just reiterated it here, your optimism for the future. And as you also mentioned, there are a lot of Bitcoiners out there who may share a lot of these beliefs, but see a much more dystopian future. And you also mentioned central bank digital currencies. This is something that has a lot of people, myself included, very worried about what the future may hold. For everyone who's listening and it hasn't been covered at this point, central bank digital currencies, this would be a system where instead of the entire banking institution being governed by private banks, like the private sector, although the central government has their hands in the banking system in a big way right now, a central bank digital currency, you could see a future where every single person has their account with the Fed. And if every single person has their account with the Fed and they have this technology where they can incentivize spending, they could cut off your access to capital if they don't like you as a person. They could start implementing a social credit score system. It gets very dystopian very quickly. On the flip side, with better technology, you have, with a benevolent leader, the potential to do really good. But in today's day and age, at least in the US, I don't believe that anyone out there really believes that we're being ruled by some benevolent leader that wants what's best for its citizens. So I guess I just painted more of the darker side before passing it off to you with the optimism. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say on this. But this is the discussion that's happening with a lot of people right now. With stronger technology comes more power to the leadership. And if the leadership is corrupted, then it can go downhill very quickly.
It can, and these fears are not like they are real concerns, and the CBDCs is a very scary thing, and these things are worth thinking about. But on the other hand, I think many of the Bitcoiners that are worried smoke too much cannabis, and they have a bit of paranoia and also just being a Bitcoiner makes you. I think you have to be a bit of a paranoid to be an early adopter of Bitcoin. Like, it's a motivator to get into it. But I think this reminds me of Michael Malice and his book The White Pill, which I recently read about the Soviet Union. I talked about the East Bloc before, and how it was basically just a giant prison, and how no one in that prison thought that it would ever end. Just like we think that the CCP will never end right now, and that they have total control over the citizens and everything. But the thing is, authoritarian systems are inherently fragile. They don't last very long. Totalitarian states don't last, because you can't just fool people forever. It doesn't work, and I think that like while the risks are truly there, and it's a thing to think about. I like I said, we have social media, Bitcoin, and everyone else on Earth via video link by the click of a button, which we didn't have pre-COVID. Like before COVID, video conferencing was a pain in the butt. It was laggy and it was hard to do. And now everyone does it all the time. And I think that is the great, like, people forget that we have that. So I think, like, even if the dollar starts hyperinflating and is gone by within 90 days, we have a pretty good shot at managing to transition into a Bitcoinized world anyway. Yeah, I try to not to be as negative as many others. But it requires people like us to inform our friends and families, to be that paranoid, obnoxious person at the party, ranting on about Bitcoin and annoying everyone. Sooner or later, they will realize that, holy shit, this clown guy has been right for the last 10 years. Like, that's look at Max Kaiser in a clown world. The court jester is the prophet. Like, that's many people view him as a clown, but he's been right about most things for the past 10 years. So who knows? I mean, yeah, we'll just have to see how it plays out. I try to look at history and see how many times in history people have been wrong about the future, and especially doomsday cults have always existed, and people have been thinking this is the end of the world all the time. And right now, it's on the right, it's the people afraid of CBDCs and totalitarianism, and on the left, it's people afraid of climate change and the oceans are going to boil, or it's something else. But we have to remember, these psychopathic leaders, so-called leaders of ours, they thrive on our fear. That's their fuel. If we're afraid of something, we're very easy to manipulate. So don't be afraid. That's key. Don't let them intimidate you. That's because when they do, they can somewhat control what you think, and that's what you want to get away from. If you want a brighter future, start thinking for yourself, take responsibility for your own actions, and stop listening to fearmongers.
So I got a fun question for you here.
All right.
Have you seen the movie Inception?
I have.
So let's say that you're in the movie Inception in an imaginary parallel universe, and
dream layers, right? You're going deeper and deeper into dreams, like, yeah. And time moves slower and slower the deeper the level, right? If I remember it correctly.
Exactly. So you're going deeper and deeper in the dream realm within the head of Vladimir Putin. You're going deeper and deeper. And for everyone who's trying to remember what this movie is, they're trying to change this guy's mind, but they need him to make the decision himself. And so you're going deeper and deeper. And then you finally, against all odds, get down there and you're able to change his mind on one thing. And he thinks it's his idea. What would you change his mind on?
His position in the world, maybe. I wish he would just step down and stop trying to control other people altogether.
That's a good answer.
Why not? Because I don't think anyone is entitled to rule over anyone else. Well, within a family, like the mother and father are to take care of their kids until they're old enough to be able to take care of themselves. But that's about as far as it gets. No person is entitled to rule another. And Putin is an asshole. Like, that's, to me, it's obvious.
Yeah. I, I would be hard pressed to find someone who would disagree with you on that.
Yeah. it's yeah, there's not a nuanced, like, all politicians may or may not have good intents. I don't think Putin has very many good intents. I think they're mostly selfish. Other politicians may think that what they do is for the best of mankind and so on, but doesn't take away that their actions are bad for everyone. And a politician that gives up his power, and there have been Russian leaders that have done that, like Gorbachev and Yeltsin are absolute heroes in my book. They stepped down. They had the power to destroy the world at some point via World War III, nuclear holocaust, and they refused to. Like, Gorbachev even refused to do the simulations, like to push the button and retaliate against a fictitious attack from the US. And at the same time, Reagan did the same thing. So you have this Dark Knight again. Do you remember the ending of the Dark Knight, where they are to blow up each other's boat, each other's ferry, the prisoners and the citizens, and they both decide they won't do it. And it was exactly that between Reagan and Gorbachev, which gives me so much hope for humanity. Like, put a new guy in charge after a couple of psychopaths, and it might not be a psychopath, and they may even at some point realize that what they're doing is evil, and I should probably just step down and dismantle the whole thing.
So you mentioned the book by Michael Malice, The White Pill.
Yeah, great book.
I haven't read it, but I have listened to a ton of his podcasts, and I listened to one recently. I believe he was on with Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Oh, you did? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. I could tell instinctively, and I believe Patrick Bet-David's a very, very intelligent guy, obviously knows a lot about business, but I felt like him and the other guys on the panel were coming in with a belief.
Okay, I'm probably confusing it with another podcast, but go on.
Okay, yeah, it might be a different one. This one came out fairly recently.
I think of Michael Chris Williamson, I think. Yeah.
Okay, I have not seen that one. But I don't think that I have the capability to lay out Michael Malice's position in a way that would do it justice. And I'll ask you, do you think that you could, for everyone listening, lay out what his view is? Or if not, you don't feel comfortable maybe just outlining what the book, The White Pill, is about?
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but his views are very close to mine. I align with him on most things. He's an anarchist. He calls himself an anarchist. I would call myself a consensualist, but it's basically the same thing. Non-aggression principle. Some people call it libertarian, other anarcho-capitalist, and so on and so forth. But it's just basically the same basic idea. We don't believe in government. And Michael Malice is very well articulated in debating other people around that and defending his views. And of course, his family fleeing the Soviet Union when he was a small child has colored his views, and he has a very healthy skepticism towards all forms of government, because he has seen how bad it can get, and especially in doing the research for this book. The book, The White Pill, is about the Soviet Union and the Cold War. So it builds up from Lenin and onwards, and what happened in that part of the world, and how the West portrayed that. How people in academia and in media in the West were very reluctant to see the truth of what was really going on there, because everyone was hoping that socialism was a viable alternative to capitalism, which is, in hindsight, obviously wasn't. It's a disaster. When you remove the price signal from the market, nothing functions. So and that book has a very it's written as a personal story, and he makes character arcs around these historical figures like Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky, and also Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, and so on and so forth. And it's a beautifully written book. It's horrible at times because it depicts what was really going on behind the Iron Curtain, and how vulgar it was, and what a humanitarian disaster the whole project was. But I think everyone should read it because it's a warning sign of what can happen if you give politicians too much power.
It's crazy how quickly removed that we in modern day society can be from many of these atrocities that have happened not too long ago.
No, it's so recent, and it's sort of been forgotten about because people don't want to believe it was true, I think. Especially not leftists.
One of the things that I think Michael does that he beautifully described it's that there are those times in life where you look at something and then someone tells you a new piece of information and it just completely shatters your worldview. That's happened a couple of times with me listening to Michael Malice, and one of them was when he was describing not anarchist as because a lot of times when people are comparing things, at least this was my case personally, I was looking at when I would hear the word anarchist, I would almost just associate it with mayhem and just
and civil war and whatever.
Civil war, exactly, and then just robbery and crime. But when he was talking about it, he was describing this as saying, look, you have anarchist relationships with the majority of your relationships in your life. Like right now, you and I, we have an anarchist relationship.
Exactly.
I'm not going and I'm not forcibly making you give me money, whatever it may be. No. But in terms of your relationship with the government, that's not an anarchist relationship because you have to pay your taxes, you have to do certain things. And if you say, hey, I'm not going to pay these taxes, then you'll get a notice and you'll eventually end up in jail if you keep not paying it. So it's not a free or anarchist type of relationship. It's a relationship where you are forced to comply with the law. And
exactly.
Even though it's not initially force or violence that backs that up, eventually, if you do not comply, there will be force taken against you.
I can elaborate on this a bit, if you will, because I'm writing a book on praxeology at the moment, and I try to sharpen my arguments around this because, like as you say, we're in an anarchistic relationship right now, and government is advertised as being something ethical. It's bringing in taxes and redistributing them wherever democratic election has chosen these people to do this for us, and blah 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 blah. But they leave out a lot of things. Like the thing is, it's not consensual. Not even the election is consensual. The whole process is like a facade, and it may or may not function better than what preceded it. But there's a good argument to be made for monarchs having a lower time preference than someone who's just elected for 4 years. You cannot know that person's true intentions. They do have an incentive to just loot the country as much as they can for 4 years and then give it to the next guy. So there's a lot of problems with democracy. Another thing is that collectivists tend to win elections because a collectivist cares more about what group he's belonging to than what that group actually thinks. So real free thinkers and individualists, they probably vote for themselves and not for a party at all because they disagree with one another to a large extent. So they don't like belonging to a group that doesn't represent them very much, which means that collectivists win elections. So there's a disproportionate amount of left-wingers in politics. And it doesn't reflect what the public actually thinks about things. So there's so many issues with that. And the thing is, the civilized way of doing things is to do them without violence, like to argue and debate and then agree upon a certain way of doing something rather than another way. That's a civilized way of doing stuff. The other the other method we have for resolving conflict is to violently force the other party to do this or that. So we can either do things non-violently or violently. And the market is just the non-violent way of organizing ourselves and letting our own free will and our efforts and letting nature have run its course and letting us keep whatever the fruits of our labor and using them for whatever we feel is good for us. And by doing that, we help everyone else reach their goals as well, because we can trade. And no trade ever happens if both parties are not in on the trade. That they both, it only happens if both parties believe that they have something to gain from the trade actually happening. Which is not true for taxes ever, and not for inflation. Nobody ever voted for inflation. It's all wrong and ethically
I would like
corrupt.
to have my money worth less.
Yeah, exactly. No one ever said that.
Let's pass that.
Yeah. Of course, John Maynard Keynes said that, and governments love it because they have look at this smart guy who said that this was right. Yeah. But you only say he was smart because he said that, right? And that's why you call him an economist, because he said exactly what you wanted to hear. And it's so sad because there is a way to like praxeology and Austrian economics is the correct way of viewing this. It is to the subjective what mathematics is to the objective. So all the social sciences you were taught in school are basically just opinion pieces. They're like opinions of whatever people who believe in government want you to think. And praxeology, the science of human action, is it's just logical reasoning from a fixed set of axioms. Like the first axiom is human action is purposeful behavior. So it admits that we do have free will. And regardless of if we do or not, like if we don't have free will, there's no point in doing anything or arguing about anything. So we don't have to take it for granted we have free will. And also they say that you can't argue against that you own your own body. If I say you own your own body and you try to argue against it, you have to use your body to argue in the first place. So you prove that you are in control and thereby own your body by arguing against it. So you can't really argue against it. But you can go so much deeper with this. And what praxeology does is it throws everything else about the scientific method out with the bathwater, because it says that empirical research cannot be done in economics because a human being can change his mind and will adapt to whatever situation that they find themselves in. Like a society, a civilization, a market is not as a static thing. It's always dynamic. The future is always unpredictable when it comes to free will stuff. So we can't do a posteriori or empirical research here. We have to do a priori deductive reasoning. And when you do that properly, it's extremely powerful, because you can, by pure argumentation, you can come to the conclusion that there is only one human right, and that's the right to be left alone, because all other human rights would actually infringe on that right. So if I say all humans have the right to have housing or food, then I cannot make that a right without infringing on the first human being's right to be left alone, because someone has to build the house.
Because it becomes someone else's responsibility.
So, exactly. So
if you have a right to it, it still has to be provided.
Yes. So if we want a system that is consistent for all people at all times, no matter where they were born, what color of their skin, what sex they are, or what anyone thinks, if we want something logically consistent, then the only thing that is logically consistent is property rights, and that we own our bodies and whatever the extension of our bodies have produced, and what we have acquired through fair trading with one another. And stolen goods are a different discussion. Yeah, Michael Malice is way better at articulating these things than I am live. But still, I think, yeah, going back to my first argument, why should different rules apply to different people just based solely on where they happen to be born? Why is that the case? And if you ask yourself that question, like, there's no other way to explain that sort of framework was forcefully pushed upon us. It was not something that we chose. We couldn't. We were born into it. So it's just like the Matrix. Every Bitcoiner's favorite metaphor. You're born into a system that you had no say in how it was designed. And the times are changing. We have the internet now. We have all these wonderful technologies, and all the books and all the movies and all the art and all the songs in the world are there by a click of a button, and all the other people are too. So why would we need anyone to tell us what to do with that? Like, it's obviously already, it's there already, all of it. Just need to admit that that's the case. And after we've done that, you don't need any of the other bullshit. You could just let people flourish and stop hindering them from doing so. Yeah.
Yeah, all of this really seems to come down to a couple core things. One of those just being sovereignty, right? And so a lot of Bitcoiners, you'll see them talking about financial sovereignty. This whole discussion and what you just outlined in a big way is sovereignty over one's body, rights versus responsibilities. I feel like a lot of people think that they have ownership of things that really, at the end of the day, you don't have ownership of when compared to Bitcoin. And so if we walk through an example, we gave sovereignty over one's body in the sense of, if you don't go and pay those taxes, for example, eventually you will be thrown in jail. You will be taken by force if you do not comply with that law. Same type of thing with property, right? If you aren't paying taxes on a home, yes, you own that home. Financially, you own that home. But at the end of the day, if you aren't able to make the payments on your property taxes, then eventually that home will be taken from you. You will need to have enough money to cover those types of expenses. So with all that said, why do you and many other Bitcoiners, when you talk about Bitcoin, talk about apex property rights, ultimate property rights? What's the difference in you owning Bitcoin versus you owning a house, for example?
Yeah, this is also harkens back to the beginning of the conversation, doesn't it? Like, it reminds me of the first couple of questions there, that Bitcoin is not something you own. It's not even something you possess. It's a secret you keep. And keeping a secret, anyone can do that. Owning a house, like when you own a house in a society without absolute property rights, like when you don't have the right to be left alone, the only other right you have is the right to obey whatever rule set is de jure that is there at the moment. Like, so your house may be taken away. Yes, there might be a lot of bureaucracy in the way, and you might find a way to around the laws that are in your area at that time, so you can find your way around stuff. But that's only true for the era in which you live. It's not very long term. It's not probably not something you can teach your kids, that this is the way to do tax planning in Switzerland at this moment, and that's true for all. Like, things change, and they seem to change faster and faster. So the difference between owning a Bitcoin and owning anything else is, like, Bitcoin is the first actual intellectual property. Knowing the secret is not only owning the Bitcoin, but it's being the Bitcoin. You are the Bitcoin. So you're not your house, you're not your car, and you're not some stupid JPEG that you can prove that you may or may not have bought at a certain point. You're not that, but you are your Bitcoins. So that's the difference. The difference is that the Bitcoin exists solely in you. You're the same thing. You're in a symbiotic relationship with this venom-like supernatural being that gives you superpowers. Uh, you have to learn how to live with it inside you, but it is something living inside you that gives you powers that don't other people don't have. So that's the difference.
And it can mean the difference between life and death in many cases.
It
I mean,
can. Yeah.
If you can't get money to get out of a country that's going into a war, let's say that you were in Ukraine, and all of a sudden you can't get your money out of the bank. If you knew the passcode for your Bitcoin, you could still access capital and get out of there. And
Yeah.
these are things where it's never a problem until it's a massive problem. Same type of thing with property. You can take billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin with you to another country, no problem.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to take billions of dollars worth of real estate with you. And
no,
that real estate can be easily taken away. I mean,
exactly.
ask any of the Russian oligarchs who had their property seized, their yachts. They can't defend the yachts against the forces that want to come and take it if they are going to go and take it.
Couple of points here. Like this is in the article, "The Bullish Case for Bitcoin" by Vijay Boyapati, about how they fled India, I think, a long time ago with a gold bar on the plane, and how hard it was to take their wealth out of the country. And there was, when the Ukraine war started, the war in Ukraine started, there was a picture going around the internet of someone trying to cross a border that had like a whole pack of rubles, a whole pack of dollars, and a gold bar confiscated by customs somewhere. I don't remember which border, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that picture got viral, and it got a ton of comments below it saying, "Look at this idiot who can't remember 12 words." and it's true. He was an idiot for not being able. And yeah, so that happens now. What happens next is that other people see this, including other people that are trying to flee countries, and they will learn from these mistakes. And at some point, they realize that all they have to do to escape is to memorize 12 words. One of the greatest moments in my Bitcoin writing career was when a guy from Venezuela messaged me on Twitter saying that my writings helped him escape the country and escape a totalitarian country with 12 words in his head, and just crossing the border to Colombia and never coming back. And that touched me deeply. Like my little scribblings from my bedroom had changed a person's life on the other side of the globe. And that's the thing with Bitcoin. Like everything you do in it has ripple effects and butterfly effects all over the planet. And we're truly helping something truly beautiful come to life here by just having this conversation and all of this stuff. It's so insanely powerful when you start thinking about what it actually means. So yeah, like I said, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, well, the more I speak with you about this, the more optimistic I'm getting, because you make some very good points. I think that every conversation, every podcast, every piece of writing, you can go and if you orange pill at least one person, especially if they're in a place where they need this type of information more than many of the people in the Western world today realize, it changes lives in a big way, a very big way. And it's hard to see when you see people trying to attack the industry ecosystem, attack the Bitcoin ecosystem, and try and stop the mining process. They're not going to stop Bitcoin. They're just hurting their own jurisdiction that they're governing over.
Yeah, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
It's going to happen somewhere else.
No, it's just, and that's the beautiful game theory behind all this. Like trying to fight it is the worst move you can make. Trying to fight it is absolutely the worst move you can make. It's much easier to just go along with it and help it come to life. So and that's so beautiful. And like the thing about this conversation and all other Bitcoin content being valuable, if you rewind the clock 5 years to 2018 and how hard it was to acquire a Bitcoin back in 2018. how hard it was to accept Bitcoin for your goods and services, how hard it was to get in touch with another Bitcoiner, how hard it was to all of it. Like the Lightning Network wasn't even there then. And here we are, like 5 years later, and it's so much bigger and so much easier. There's a country that adopted it. There's a big ass what do you call it? The Nasdaq company. What is MicroStrategy? What do you call that? A big corporation that adopted. Like there's so much stuff going on. And all of these things being built behind the scenes, like Noster, for instance, or Fedimint, like that is making multi-sig solutions easier for absolutely everyone. Like Africa and South America have such a chance here to get a head start on every other country in the world. And
we actually,
when you add it all together, it's so good. Yeah,
we talked about Noster the other day. There's someone else on the podcast, but we haven't talked about Fedimint, and I'd love to dive down that rabbit hole with you if you're open to it.
Yeah, I know little about it, but I know some. It's a way to...
We can just go very high level for everyone listening, because I'm assuming that many people out there just haven't even heard of, maybe have heard the name thrown around, but don't know anything about it.
Yeah, so Fedimint is a way for small villages in Africa or so to make hodling Bitcoin and not using custodial services easier. So it's basically like, if you know what a multisig is, that you need X out of Y keys in order to unlock the Bitcoin and move them somewhere. So Fedimint is basically giving you a network of trusted third parties, ironically enough, that you can set up multisig Bitcoin wallets with. And I don't know how the exact reputation system or whatever in it works, but it's basically saying that, yeah, I know this person, I trust this person, I know this person, I trust this person. And then it's all connected via network. So if someone I say I trust, and that person say I trust someone, then they get some sort of scoring, and you do it like that. I'm doing a great injustice to Obi and the team here, because I'm bad at explaining it. But let's just say it's a way. It makes it easier for people to control their own keys and to set up secure Bitcoin multisig solutions.
Yeah, that's been my understanding of it too. I don't know the exact ins and outs of how it works. It's been explained to me one time, but I wouldn't feel comfortable explaining it. But as many people know, there are different ways in which Bitcoin can be held, all the way from just hot wallets online to cold storage, and then to multi-sig, where it's very inconvenient for you to interact with a multi-sig wallet. You can have different keys, and you have to have multiple people signing off multiple keys signing off on a transaction for it to actually go through. And so,
exactly,
all these developments are important.
Yeah, Obi explained it to me like almost a year back now, but he's way smarter than I am. So yeah, he will have to explain it again at some point. So yeah, but to me, it's just fascinating to see all these things, regardless of how much I choose to hone in on them and study them. It's just so cool to see the entire ecosystem just growing. I tend to focus more on, because Bitcoin makes you appreciate the division of labor a lot. So I choose to, instead of focusing on understanding technical solutions and all of this, my part in this is to make this educational part of it accessible to people. I'm trying to find my route here and my path, and I think that is in writing books about Bitcoin and adjacent concepts like praxeology, and doing talks and interviews like this, and explaining to people how they can view the world differently. I think that's what I focus on, and I have this great network of people who know all the other stuff. So I I have the best people in the world on what used to be speed dial, so yeah, not too worried about that. But I find it all fascinating, and all of it makes me very optimistic.
Yeah, it's incredible to see how many different places that people can contribute to the ecosystem, because there are so many different ways that people can participate. One from an education side to, which I think is really important, you yourself, and then a lot of these other people that are going and putting these ideas out into the world. It makes it a lot easier for someone today versus rolling the clock back, as you mentioned, in 2018. The resources just weren't there. You didn't have publicly traded companies holding Bitcoin on their balance sheets. I can't even imagine how many people have been touched by the work of Michael Saylor and his views on
No,
what Bitcoin stands for. So it's interesting to see how all this is evolving.
absolutely. Yeah, and there's a lot more going on than meets the eye, than what people think. And people
What
have a
are
hard time thinking in exponentials, and this is growing exponentially.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what are some of the developments that we haven't talked about here that you've been most excited by or that you've been noticing?
Well, we just talked about them, didn't we? Like
We've talked
Nostr,
about quite a
no,
few. I just want to make sure that
Nostr and
I don't.
Fedimint are like the big ones, I guess. And I should really get on Nostr. I haven't started that yet because I just don't have time for another social media in my life at this point. But I do understand the power of it, and yeah, there's a couple of companies that I'm working with. I'm an advisor for the Orange Pill app, which is an interesting thing,
Ah, that's great.
where
Yeah.
you can find other Bitcoiners within a certain radius from where you are. So it gives us out as little information as possible about your location, but shows you how far off other Bitcoiners are. So you can easily contact them and uh, decide to meet them and even date them if you want to. And it also has a bit of a paywall in order to keep bots and spam out of the platform. But you can sign up for a lifetime membership. I think that's 1 million sats or something. Uh, and then yeah, and that's growing pretty fast and going better than I expected it to. And it's cool to see that network evolve. And more than that, there's this platform called Emeralize, which I'm very excited about because the praxeology book will be turned into a course on Emeralize app. So it's a Lightning Network powered cross between Udemy and Substack. So it's basically online education with Lightning Network payment solutions. So you can uh, do a course, and whenever people watch your presentation, you can have a streaming sat solution, or you can have one time payments. You can have pay back some sats whenever they graduate, or you set up whatever payment solution you want if you're an educator. And as a student, there are also a lot of options. Like bringing Bitcoin to that world is a very good idea, I think, and you know, making it easy for people to use value for value solutions. So that's exciting. Of course, I'm excited about Madeira too. I cannot say too much about it, but I'm in an organization on the island of Madeira called Free Madeira that's working with the government there and trying to orange pill an island in the Atlantic Ocean, basically, as much as we can on many different fronts and levels. There's a meetup in Funchal every month. So if you follow at Free Madeira on Twitter, you'll get all the news. So that's exciting too. The Consensus Network is exciting. My publishing house, or the publishing house I work for, does translations of Bitcoin books and books that are closely related to Bitcoins, like Mises Institute books and so on. And yeah, there's a lot of things happening behind the curtains there too. So I know a whole bunch of people are working behind the curtains and making the wheels turn in the Bitcoin space for sure. And things are being built, and it's very exciting.
That's awesome. I hadn't actually heard of all of those yet. I had heard of the Orange Pill app because Brian DeMint, he was on one of our weekly Twitter spaces.
Yeah,
And
Brian's great.
yeah, he's amazing. He's actually a customer of SAS Mining. He's currently
All right, all
mining
right.
mining Bitcoin with us on Hydro. But
Nice.
during that conversation, I got a chance to learn a lot about the Orange Pill app. I joined it just before the actual conversation with him, so I'd become a user. And so my experience coming into it, I was amazed because first off, I like the concept. It sounds weird, but I like the concept of paying up front. I think it just
Yeah,
removes fake accounts. It removes a lot of scams. And at the end of the day, if you're not paying for something, you're the product in a big way.
exactly.
And Bitcoiners understand value for value. So I
Yeah,
had no problem paying, getting on there. And I think that psychologically, there's something about not only being value aligned with many of the people on certain things in because everyone on there is on the Orange Pill app into Bitcoin, but
yeah,
people are just very responsive on there too. So I'm on there, I'm responsive. I'm
yeah,
probably more responsive there than on a lot of other places. And it's been
yeah.
incredible hearing the metrics of how quickly the Orange Pill app has grown. And I'm
Yeah,
excited for the
it's
event
wonderful.
side.
Yeah,
Yeah, once that's fully up and running, and we have our bearings on our end, I think it would be great to start using that as an events app.
yeah, and they collaborate with BTC Map, which is another excellent project, open source Bitcoin layer on top of Google Earth, so to speak, mapping system thing. So I know the guy that programs that. And that develops that, and it's a really cool project too. And they have a lot of collaborations with other apps such as Orange Pill app to incorporate like a good map of where the Bitcoin, where the places that take Bitcoin are. So yeah, it's growing organically. It takes a while, but you know, and the places which adopt, like if you start being Bitcoin friendly in a place, Bitcoiners will come there sooner or later, and you like have to make a little. And as soon as there are other Bitcoiners around, uh, just a handful of other Bitcoiners around in the town you live in, make everything so much easier. Uh, Paying bills and everything, you can just shoot sats to one another, and don't care. You don't have to care about all the hassles of the old fiat system. It's just gone, all of it. So just being in a place where there are other Bitcoiners around is just amazing.
One thing that is not directly Bitcoin related, but I'm very curious about is your experience in self-publishing. So what
Yeah,
was that process like? Because I feel like with the channels that are available today, it's a completely different world than, pre-social media, pre
yeah.
things like Substack and all these other platforms being able to self-publish. So I'm curious what your experience was like going down that route.
You mean publishing actual paperback books? That's sort of what I
Just the
view
whole
as.
process from having the idea, hey, I want to go create a book, and you want to go self-publish.
Yeah,
What were the different things that you had to do to make that happen?
it's pretty easy. You download a template and use whatever fonts and typesetting is in that template, and you create a cover in some online cover art creation tool, and you sign up for KDP, which is Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing platform, uh, and you have a couple of different templates to choose from, and you order a proofreading copy for yourself, so you get a first look of what the book will look like, and then you finalize it and you press a button and it's out there for people to buy. And Amazon, of course, takes a cut and you get the rest. And that's what I did for my first two books, or three books if you count everything, or the 3-minute reads also. But the latest, everything divided by 21 million, and also the re-release of Sovereignty Through Mathematics and Independence Reimagined, that is just out. That was also via Consensus Network, which is, as I said, the publishing house I'm working with. And now at this level, like I said, I believe in the division of labor, and when you self-publish, you have to do everything yourself. Uh, and getting to a certain level in your writing career, you can sort of, it's so easy to outsource stuff nowadays. There's a throng of people just eager to help you, especially if you're a Bitcoiner, like, because Bitcoiners want to help other Bitcoiners succeed. And that's one thing that just baffled me with all the books, how quickly translators wanted to translate them, and editors wanted to help me edit them, and proofreaders wanted to help me proofread them. And yeah, so right now I'm working with a team on the praxeology book, with a bunch of people, helping, like two main editors that are helping me edit the thing. There's a bunch of proofreaders, and there's a bunch of translators. There's a couple of people that are good at praxeology to look through the book and look for errors or concepts I've misunderstood, if there are any. And yeah, it's just great to have a team like that backing you up. And also, the older books are now being translated into Swedish, which is my mother's tongue. So it feels pretty weird to read your own text in Swedish, but the translations are really good. They're way better than they've found way better words than I would have found on my own. So it's just great to have this network of teams doing stuff here and there, and that is somewhat related to what you do. Like, yes, I'm starting to collaborate with a couple of online merchants in Germany as well, and designers. We're going to make a couple of things happen here this spring, uh, and sell a couple of new merch related things. And yeah, it's all fun and games. Like what I'm doing right now is, I'm throwing things at the wall and I see what sticks, and I'm just trying to enjoy the ride. And it's an easy ride to enjoy.
Yeah, I can tell that you enjoy creating, and I fall in a very similar bucket. I'm actually very curious. I want to ask that what was the name of the publishing house one more time? The new one?
Consensus Network, Consensus with a K.
Consensus Network with a K.
Yeah. They have a website. They have an easy link, bitcoinbook.shop. So that's easy to remember. You find everything from there. So if you want to put a link in the show notes or something, so it's bitcoinbook.shop.
And what part of the process do they help with? Like how far does it reach?
Well, that's up to me. Right now with the praxeology book, I'm sitting with Nico, the CEO of Consensus, and we're editing it chapter by chapter. And we're really, because the praxeology book is going to be on under a lot of scrutiny from the community. So we're like dissecting it chapter by chapter and trying to make each chapter as good as it can be. Which is not how I wrote the other three books. Those are much more stream of consciousness type of thing. But this thing has been a bit more. I've had to be a bit more meticulous to get the job done. But it's a very rewarding process to do something that you never set out to do earlier in life, and you just find a new skill to practice. And you practice doing it, and you become better at doing it over time. And it's just, to me, very rewarding that you can still do that in your mid 40s and just find something else to do and be better at it. Which this is too, by the way. Doing podcasts and interviews and having debates with people, like, that's also a skill you can work on. And the way I see it, like, you have your life, and you know that if you don't do anything, you won't have any luck. Like, nothing will happen. Nothing positive will ever happen to you if you don't do anything. And you can also know that if you do something, most of the time nothing will happen anyway, and it will lead you nowhere. But at least you have the chance of getting somewhere. So the more things you do, the more you increase your chances of something actually happening. And that's the way that's my philosophy, sort of. That's how I try to look at life. And who's to say, like, this is a point Arnold Schwarzenegger makes also, by the way, like, who's to say, don't listen to the naysayers and the people who try to push you down and say you can't do that, you're not a computer scientist, or you're not an economist, or you're not a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist, you could never do that. Well, fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyway. And it's not, we're just people, all of us. And if you have the ability to deep dive into a subject and to express yourself creatively about it, why shouldn't you? Like, that's the way that's the way I see it.
100%. And I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. So many different points you made. One, I do think that at the end of the day, it just takes a lot, almost like being obsessed with something. A lot of the things that we've talked about in this conversation, we've spent so much more time looking into so many other topics outside of just the things that we talked about here. When you become obsessed with something, you learn a lot about it, and then new ideas form and percolate to the surface. And then becoming, for example, as you mentioned with podcasting, it's something that it's so weird because it's so much harder than I thought it would be initially coming in. I thought it would be, oh, you just hop on a Zoom call and you just have a conversation and then, like, okay, you're all done. But I just remember having my first couple conversations with people that I've spoken with, people that I had actually spoken with in person or spoken with many, many times. And then all of a sudden we're on a podcast. I'm like, that's the worst conversation we've ever had. Like, what just happened? I don't even want to put that out. And it's just one of those things that it takes time, just getting the reps and getting used to it. It's really, really difficult. And I couldn't even imagine writing a book right now. I feel like that would take so much time for me to even begin to wrap my head around.
Yeah, the trick is to write a pamphlet and call it a book. I almost forgot the Freedom Footprint show. I'm doing a podcast myself. Like, we released 26 episodes already. So it's called the Freedom Footprint Show, and you can find it on most podcast platforms, including YouTube. So we have 26 episodes out already with a lot of cool guests. And I'm doing it with my co-host, Luke the Pseudofin, who's he's a great guy to collaborate with, because all I have to do is, put something in the calendar and be there at that time and just rant like this about this and that. And he does all the boring work with editing and putting it out there and making show notes and whatever. He does all of that, managing the social media account. And that's perfect. Like, I couldn't have asked for more than that. It's just great to have a show, and for me, it's just a bonus if we get the listens or anything. I just do it to keep in touch with all of these people in this great network that I really want to hang out with and know. And so I love doing that, and doing a podcast, like trying to be an interviewer. I mean, that's another skill that you can learn. In the beginning, I was crap at it because I just talk all the time, and I interrupt the guest and blah blah blah. But I'd like to think I get better at that, and that I shut up every once in a while now when I do an interview. But yeah, it's all because it's so exciting, all of it. That's it's just enthusiasm, I guess.
Yeah, and the incredible thing about a podcast is that you get to meet so many extremely intelligent people. Every single person that you bring onto a podcast, they're exceptional at least one thing.
Exactly.
And many times more than one. And so It's just an incredible thing where you get to speak with so many interesting people. And what's even more amazing is that for everyone listening, think about what it is that we're doing right now. We're in different parts of the world. We're having a conversation, and there are other people tuning in, participating in a way in this conversation with their own experience, listening, learning, and then going out into the world and doing whatever it is that they're working on. And they can pause it, they can go back in time, they can go forward. It's the dematerialization of everything in a way. which if you had talked with someone about what it is that we're doing right now 100 years ago, they would look at you like you're nuts because you don't have any of the technologies 100 years ago that are
No.
necessary for this right now.
And if I just look at my mother, she has no idea, but she used to work in radio for a long time. She's a journalist and used to work on the radio when she was active in her work life. It was quite a long time ago, but still, she has no idea of how big the internet is and how powerful it is, and all of these channels, and how you follow people, and how like how massive this is compared to state-owned television, which is all we had in Sweden for most of her life, and a huge chunk of mine. So yeah, it feels like, and like being in the Bitcoin space, and also in the podcasting space, and all of these interesting communities. It just feels like you have a front row seat in the ride of the into the future. Like you have insider information about the future of humanity, which is just insane when you think about it.
Yeah. Speaking of the future, the last topic that I want to dive into with you a little bit, if we can, is artificial intelligence. So have
Yeah,
you been playing around with these tools like Chat GPT and any of these other AI tools that have been coming out?
I think everyone has played around with them, even though they don't know that they have, for quite some time now. Every time you do a Google search, there's an AI doing a ton of stuff in the background, I guess. And I haven't been using Chat GPT very much, if at all. What I have been using are these tools to help me write, like Grammarly. I'm using Grammarly a lot, and there's a powerful AI in that helps me with my writing. uh, and the trick is, I figured out in the beginning, I just did whatever it told me to do, but that didn't make the text very much better. So the thing is to learn how to use the tool, and to use it to only to the extent where it actually helps and improves whatever you're working on. But I still think there's a lot left in humanity. Like there's people have this dystopian view of tools, as they always do, and I think we're quite far away from a sentient general purpose AI. It's all still quite narrow. I mean, what Chat GPT does, it literally does, it just guesses the next word in a text, what the appropriate next word is after every word. So I still think there's a lot of things for humans to do in that space. And my favorite quote about this is from Terry Pratchett, the comedy fantasy author, who said, "Real stupidity beats artificial intelligence every time." And I hope that's the case. Um, yeah, I'm not afraid about it. Like all tools ever invented by and technologies ever invented by humans were invented to save someone time somewhere. And if we have a functioning free market, which we have at least the capacity to have now when we have Bitcoin, then all tools and technologies save time for everyone via the division of labor and free trade. So I think there's nothing to fear but fear itself in this.
Well, let's hope that things don't end up the same way that they did with chess.
Why not? What's wrong with what's going on in like? You mean the latest debate of Magnus Carlsen's opponent possibly having a butt plug telling him what moves to do?
Oh yeah,
What
with
moves to
Hans
make?
Niemann, that
Yeah,
like
yeah.
ravaged through the news cycle. No, I was just talking about how good AI was at chess.
Yeah, but is that a
But
bad thing, really? It's chess is basically just an equation. It's mathematics. That's all it is. And well, we used mathematics to solve all other equations. So like, still, if you if two people play chess in front of a campfire in the woods somewhere, the game can still give them immense pleasure. And there's like, you don't have to like, elite chess and top players are just a tiny little part of what chess on the whole is. Like most chess games are played with absolute amateurs that are just enjoying themselves, and that doesn't go away, does it? I mean, just because the equation is actually solved by a super intelligent computer doesn't mean that you can't have fun with it. What I find insanely fascinating is that this Magnus Hans thing is that there's no higher authority in chess than Magnus himself. Like, so when he says that he's obviously cheating and he obviously has a butt plug telling him what moves to make, like, there's no one that can argue against that because he's the highest authority. And I find that so insanely fascinating that top level chess is a world that is exclusively for those that are actually on the top. No one else knows what the hell is going on there.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of chess, and I've been playing it ever since I was young. I played a ton when I was younger, and then I stopped for a while, and then it got kind of reinvigorated with the cycle after Queen's Gambit came out, and then I played for the first time, and God, I don't even know how long. It had been too long, and I got the app, and with the app, you can play against people online, and it matches you up based on your elo, based on your rating.
Yeah.
And so I got back into it, and I got a little back too into it, and so I had to delete the app from my phone because I was spending too much time playing.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's too time consuming.
Exactly. Yeah. And
like all
I was
games.
also trying to improve because on the app there's like analysis of your moves and your openings and things that you're doing right and wrong. And so I was looking through that and in my free time trying to get better at it. And I said, this is taking up too much time. I can't spend this much time on chess now that I'm at this point in my life. But yeah, it's a fun game, man. And with the Hans thing, it was fascinating because this guy out of nowhere just got so much better and started beating everyone and just steamrolling top players, including Magnus. And then Magnus refused to play him. And so every time he would play him, he'd pull out of the tournament or he'd resign. But there was no actual proof. And this butt plug thing was hilarious because there's this other streamer that was online. And the way that got picked up, the guy who started the butt plug conversation, when he asked about it, he said, I was making a joke on a stream. It got picked up out of nowhere by a news outlet. And then Elon Musk saw that news outlet quoting it and made a tweet about it. And then it had a life of its own. And everyone started thinking that he was cheating with a butt plug. Now, after looking into it, what most likely ended up happening is when you look at the top players, there's such a thin margin of difference between who the top players and someone else. And there are just a couple key moments within a game where if they can find a particular type of move, then it can make all the difference in how the match plays out. So what some of the top players like Hikaru and some others are speculating is that he can be searched, but if somehow he's getting any type of signal, whether it's a buzz or anything anywhere, or looking at a sign where they know that it's an important move, this is a game-changing potential, like winning potential move. If they can find it on the board here within their time, then they'll take the time and find the right move in that scenario where, you know, you might not know that it's a great idea to sack your rook in a particular situation on the board. But if you know that it's the moment where there's a big move on the table, then you'll spend a little bit of time and find it. And so that's the theory out there, but he hasn't been caught.
You obviously know way more than I do about this story. So it's
clear that I've spent too much time.
I only heard like rumors about it, so I know nothing about it really. I just find it fascinating that butt plug chess cheating is a thing now. What if I'm having a butt plug, telling me what to say during this interview? Like there's no way you could know, right?
That is true. I would have no idea if that was what was going on right now. So this has been so much fun. I got a couple rapid fire questions to finish up here with. Similar to when we started. Yeah. So the first one, if you could eat one type of food for the rest of your life, and in this alternate reality, it's purely based on taste. It's not about how healthy you are, how you feel. That's all equivalent for everything, but just purely on taste. If you could only eat one piece of food, one kind of food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Porterhouse steak, or which is both a ribeye and sirloin, if I remember correctly. So now basically a T-bone steak. Yeah,
without
a doubt. Medium rare.
That's a good answer, and honestly, that's probably pretty healthy too, all things considered.
Yeah. It's one of
Compared
those
to
that, like, if I'm forced to just eat one, that's probably. I mean, enjoy. Both my brothers are chefs, and I enjoy a variety of foods. I like meat the most, so I eat a lot of meat and some vegetables and fish on occasion, and try to stay away from carbs. But I find some carbs to be incredibly tasty at sometimes. I like cheese a lot. Like, there's
oh
a lot
yeah,
of foods that, yeah. So I've tried a couple of diets. When I tried the meat only diet, I got a severe case of diverticulitis, and I don't know if that was actually related to the diet. But after having that experience, I'm not trying anything extreme again. I think I'm too old to, like, my body's used to a certain type of food, and like I shouldn't mess with it too much. Even though I buy some of the theories around, it's probably better to eat mostly meat than, and you should probably stay away from processed foods as much as you can, and sugary, uh, carby things. So there's something to that, of course, and the more expensive the food, the better it is, unfortunately. At least up to a certain point. I mean, a good porterhouse steak is probably quite expensive. So it's hard to have one a day. But if I had to choose one food for every day, it would probably be that. Yeah, I tried fasting a couple of times. That sort of works if you want to get slimmer or
yeah.
not
Fasting's
as
great.
fat. Yeah, so fasting is good on occasion. That's one thing you can do. Yeah, I would find it hard to live out without eggs and bacon as well.
That's a
And
very good point.
unfortunately, I like beer a lot too. Like, I find beer to be very tasty. So, like,
That
we
is
all
my
have our
one
vices.
big vice, I would say. I'm
Yeah,
very good on eating healthy, diet, everything else, but the one that always just, because it's pretty much the worst thing that you can eat or drink, is alcohol, and it's also just by far the most fun. So it's
yeah.
balancing the two.
Like, from a physical perspective, yes, but from a but it is a very social thing, and it's ingrained in all of our culture, and it's kind of hard to avoid. And you can have a lot of fun conversation late nights over a couple of pints of whatever. Uh,
Oh yeah,
and
that's where the
and
best podcasts are. The ones that are unfortunately forgotten. It's when
Yeah, and yeah,
you've had a
but
bunch of
still,
drinks.
I think the positive effects are under underrated, if you will. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, there are
it's a
a lot of side
part of life,
benefits.
I guess. Yeah, and I'm enjoying having a good meal and a couple of beers with Bitcoiners, just as much as the other guy is.
Are you like an IPA guy, a Pilsner, stout?
Uh, I like all of it, but like, if I had to pick one beer to drink for the rest of my life, it would be the Czech lager in Prague. Like, the lager in Prague is just fucking amazing.
Okay,
Uh,
I'm gonna have to make note of that for
yeah,
the next time I go to Prague. I'll.
yeah. I
'Cause
visited
last time I
Prague
was
for
there,
the.
I did not have any lager while I was there.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, that's like
No.
going to Finland without having a sauna. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I was there for like 2 days or something, and I don't know,
yeah.
just didn't
Never
didn't
got
end up
to it.
drinking any lager. Yeah,
Yeah, you should just have a big uh, Urquell or something. It's
I did
really
check out a
tasty over
beer
there.
garden during the World Cup, though. It was when Germany was, I believe, in the semis, and I think it was in Munich. And
Yeah,
yeah, it was Munich or Berlin. I can't remember which. I went to both at that time. I just remember I was in a beer garden. Everyone was just, the energy was unbelievable, and I just couldn't imagine being a fan of the other team in that scenario. You would 100% get killed if you had a jersey from the other team. So that would have
yeah,
been a really bad joke. I probably wouldn't be here right now if I had done
yeah.
that.
By the way, my signature wine is done. The Infinity Red. Like I'm making a wine with this equation on the bottle, and it's a
Really?
70-30 Bobal Reserva and Monastrell Crianza grape wine. So 70-30, it's 7 and 3, so it's 21, and blah blah blah. So there's a bunch of Easter eggs in the making of the wine. I was there an early one morning picking some of the grapes myself with a couple of Spanish farmers who didn't speak a word of English, but had their someone. After 1 hour of work, they had breakfast, and they drank red wine out of these PET bottles for breakfast, and had anchovies with garlic for breakfast with red wine. So it
Wow.
was very very Spanish. Beautiful sunrise, and running around picking grapes for my own wine. That was a very special moment, and I found a distributor for this and a way to ship the things. So we're going to set up a website here as soon as I find time to do that and start actually selling the wine. People have been signing up on a mailing list on my website, knutsvanholm.com, and those people obviously get a chance to buy it before everyone else. But yeah,
I'm gonna
it
have to
will be
sign
available
up.
soon, and there's only 600 bottles for the entire world. So in this first batch, so yeah, looking forward to hearing what people think about it, because we did quite a bit of testing, which was all good, and yeah, trying out different wines to figure out which one you like the most, and make it your signature wine. It's a very it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
No, I enjoy that a
man,
lot.
I don't know
Yeah,
how you do it.
yeah. Another one of those dreams I didn't even know I had come true. Yeah. So yeah, uh, enjoying that, enjoying all of it a lot. Of course,
Yeah, no, that sounds like a blast. I mean,
it
starting your
is.
own wine.
Yeah, yeah,
When I was younger, that was one of my dad's hobby, and my dad's hobby was winemaking. And so
yeah.
ever since I was young, I would go with them to the vineyards, and we would, I mean, he would basically do everything. I was just running around in a vineyard, for being real. But I, we would get all the grapes that get sent back, and then I would just crush them with them, and then we'd make the wine. And that was like our bonding in a big way when I was younger, just hanging out with my dad and helping him make wine. And he
That's
doesn't
pretty
make as
cool.
much anymore, but I think it would be a pretty incredible. It would be incredible to have, I guess, what you're creating, like your own line of wine. He wouldn't make a ton, but he would make pretty decent amount, and he'd submit some into some competitions, just
Yeah, yeah,
for local
yeah.
things, nothing massive.
Yeah, but I'm making 600 bottles here in the first round, and that's not a lot. Like, I'm
No,
keeping 2 boxes for myself, so that's like, how many is that? That's like 50 gone already, and there's 550 for everyone else, and like,
yeah, that's scarcity right there.
yeah, it
People
is.
better get on that waiting list. We'll have to link
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. Uh, any more rapid fire?
We got two more. We got two
All
more.
right.
So the second one, if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be? Yeah,
I
this is a
mean,
really tough
like
question.
this is one of those where I'll think of another after we've finished up here. But right now, I'd say Ludwig von Mises, maybe, or George
What?
Orwell, maybe. Uh, yeah,
Both good
someone
answers.
to have an interesting conversation with. Why not one of the Pythons, the dead one, Graham Chapman? uh, yeah, but there are so many though to choose from. I think choosing someone from earlier than the 20th century would be very hard to have a conversation with, because the language was so different.
That is
So
true. I guess we would have to assume that you speak the same language.
yeah, it's kind of hard, because what topics would you talk about with someone who has never experienced even a TV, like it's or a car for that matter. It's pretty hard.
Yeah. It goes
uh
back to what we talked about earlier, where imagine if you could listen to podcasts with a lot of these people that you can only hear about in books, and I think it would be amazing if they had conversations like this podcast with these people from back
Yeah, yeah,
hundreds and
yeah.
hundreds of years ago.
But I think one aspect of why that question is so hard to answer is that there are so many brilliant people alive today, and I do get to speak with them. So a lot of my favorite thinkers are in Bitcoin, and I'm friends with them. And it's just I pinch myself every day because of that fact, because it's so amazing to me, because it's just like that. It's like picking any historical figure and having a dinner with them. But I'm not picking historical figures. I'm picking figures that are actually here and in the same now as I am, trying to make the same idea come to life as I am. So that's even more amazing to me, that I get this privilege to talk to people in the Bitcoin space, like yourself. I enjoy all these conversations. I mean, there's nothing better than just talking about Bitcoin. I
Yeah,
guess.
it's a good time. We'll have to
Yeah,
do this in person and have some wine
yeah. Are you
and some
coming to
steak.
Miami?
I am. Yeah, we're going to be. That's coming up pretty soon. Bitcoin 2023, right?
Yeah, it's 50 days or something.
Yeah. So
So
I guess
I
I'll
guess
see
I'll
you
see you
there.
there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that'll be fun.
yeah.
So final rapid fire question, and I'm really curious for this. It's another tough one, but what is the best piece of advice that you have received?
That which you can do without your own.
And you said that that was from your father,
My grandfather,
your
on
grandfather.
on my father's side. I
What
guess I
about
guess
that?
yeah. That's the first thing that came to mind, and I yeah, it's gonna be hard to top.
What about that has been so powerful for you?
It's so layered. There's so much there, uh, and you can view it in so many different lights, and even a thing like it's connected to many other philosophical insights, like true happiness comes from inside and not from the outside world, and you can uh, yeah, my friend Mr. Cat Hodlonaut taught me a lot about stoicism, and a lot of stoicism is connected to that, like Marcus Aurelius and these old uh, Romans that had ideas about. It's sort of like a Western version of Buddhist philosophy, where you admit what's within your control and what's without outside of your control, and you focus on what you actually control, which is mostly just your responses to external stimuli. You can somewhat control those. You can't control whatever thoughts happen to end up in your brain. You can't control if you get a parking ticket or not. You can't control if someone walks up to you on the street and kicks you in the nuts. All you can do is you can choose how to react to these external stimuli and how much they affect your mood. And through those insights and a bit of meditation on top, and knowing thyself and so on and so forth, you can get into a very peaceful uh, mindset. And my mind is not peaceful. I mean, there's a war going on in there. There's like a cacophony of thoughts all the time, and being bombarded by good and mostly bad ideas all the time. Like it's like one of those soundtracks for a cartoon, like Spike Jonze, all the instruments and horns and honking things and all sorts of strange things going on at the same time. And to be able to find peace in a mental environment like that requires you to find some sort of way of controlling your impulses, and not being that affected by external stimuli, but being happy I mean, there's so much to be happy about. Like, you're alive, for fuck's sake. It's what are the odds? I always try. Religious people always make the point that how can the universe be so fine tuned for you to exist in it? It's the odds are so low. But like, I think there's a circular argument. It's like, if the parameters hadn't been the way they were, you wouldn't have been here to experience them. so so that's the thing. The odds were extremely low, and you are here to experience them. So enjoy this ride while it lasts. I mean, the transition to death is going to be painful, and after death, it will probably be just like when before you were born. So nothing will matter then. But you have this temporary flickering of light that is your conscious being here and now, and every moment ceases to exist, and you won't get it back if you didn't enjoy it when it happened. So like, enjoy, for fuck's sake. That's my best advice to anyone else.
I think that is a beautiful message to end on. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. This has been absolutely incredible, and I'm pumped for Miami, man.
Yeah, likewise. I enjoy this a lot. I'm usually the host these days, so it's good for me to go on a podcast and be the guest every now and then, where people want me to rant too much.
Oh yeah.